So that is the whole trick, is it? You just walk. Every morning after breakfast, out the door, around the block, a good brisk clip until the cheeks go pink, and there it is, the entire prescription for staying alive and upright past 65. The doctor says it, your neighbor says it, the fellow on the radio says it. Get your steps in, keep the old ticker humming, and nature will take care of the rest. It is clean, it is simple, and everybody believes it. And I believed it too, for about as long as it takes to look at one number. That number is wrong. Flat wrong, and I can prove it to you before we are through. Not with opinion, not with somebody's diet book, but with the plain arithmetic of what is happening inside your own body while you stroll around that block feeling virtuous. Here is the number that broke it open for me. 1 in every 4 people over the age of 65 falls down every single year. Not trips a little. Falls. Goes to the floor. In this country alone, that is around 14 million people a year hitting the ground, and something like 38,000 of them do not get back up. Falls are the leading cause of injury death for people that age. Now sit with that a second. 14 million people, and a great many of them are the good ones, the responsible ones, the ones who took the advice and walked every day like they were told. If walking were really the whole answer, the floor would not keep winning. So either the whole population is lazy, which I do not believe for a minute, or the advice is missing something enormous. And it is missing something enormous. Let me show you what. But I am going to be fair about this. I am not going to stand up here and sneer at walking, because walking is genuinely marvelous, and the people who recommend it are not fools. They notice something real. So before I tear the idea apart, let me build it up. Let me make you feel exactly why walking earns your trust. Because the wrong idea is usually wrong in an interesting way. It is usually a right idea that got too greedy and tried to cover everything. So what does walking actually do, and do well? It works your heart and your lungs. There is a thing scientists measure called your VO2 max. Do not let the name scare you. All it means is the biggest amount of oxygen your body can grab out of the air and actually put to use when you are working hard. Think of it as the size of your engine. A bigger engine, more oxygen moved per minute, more life in you, more hill you can climb before you have to stop and pretend you are admiring the view. And here is the beautiful part. That engine is not fixed. A man or a woman in their 60s or 70s who has been sitting around, who starts walking in earnest, can raise that VO2 max by something like 15 to 30% inside a few months. A few months. That is a big engine upgrade for a machine that has been running for 70 years, and it is not vanity. That number tracks with how long people live. Higher VO2 max, lower chance of dying early. So when the doctor tells you to walk, the doctor is not wrong. The doctor is handing you one of the most powerful, cheapest, most reliable medicines we have ever found, and it comes with no bottle and no side effects except maybe a sore heel. I want you to really believe that, because I mean it. If you did nothing but walk, you would be far, far better off than the fellow on the couch. Walking lowers your blood pressure. It keeps the sugar in your blood behaving. It clears your head. It makes the heart a stronger, steadier pump. For the whole cardiovascular story, that river of blood and the muscle that drives it, walking is close to a miracle. I will not let anyone take that away from you. So now you are comfortable. Now you are nodding. Now you are thinking, this Feynman fellow spent 5 minutes agreeing with my doctor. What is he up to? Here is what I am up to. I let you get comfortable on purpose, because I am about to pull a leg out from under the chair and I want you to feel the wobble. The people who study aging and exercise, the ones at the National Institute on Aging, they do not talk about exercise as one thing. They say there are 4 different kinds and your body needs all 4, because each one is doing a completely separate job. There is endurance, which is the heart and lung business we just praised, the walking. There is strength, which is your muscles being able to push and pull real force. There is balance, which is your body's whole quiet system for knowing where it is in space and correcting itself before you tip. And there is flexibility, keeping the joints and tissues loose enough to move through their full range. 4 different systems, 4 different jobs, and here is the thing that ought to make you sit up. Training one of them does almost nothing for the other 3. Picture a stool with 4 legs: endurance, strength, balance, flexibility. When you walk every day and call it your whole exercise, you are polishing one leg of that stool until it gleams. You are sanding it, waxing it, making it the finest leg any stool ever had, and the other 3 legs you are leaving to rot. Now you go to sit down on that stool, and it does not matter how gorgeous the one leg is. A stool with 1 strong leg and 3 weak ones does not hold you up. It dumps you on the floor. And now maybe you are starting to hear that number from the beginning of this talk in a different way. 1 in 4. On the floor. Let me make it concrete, because I do not like to wave my hands. Let me tell you what is happening to your muscle while you are not looking, because this is where the comfortable story really starts to crack, and it cracks quietly, which is the worst way. There is a thing that happens to every human being who is lucky enough to keep having birthdays. It has a name: sarcopenia, and the name is not important. We will get to why the name is not important later. What is important is the mechanism. Starting somewhere around age 30, you begin to lose muscle, slowly at first. Something like 3 to 8% of your muscle mass gone every decade, just quietly leaving whether you notice or not. And then, after about age 60, it stops being polite. It speeds up. Now you can be losing something on the order of 5 to 10% of your muscle every decade. 10%. Think about what that means over the years. Most men will lose roughly 30% of all the muscle they ever had across a lifetime, and by the time some folks reach their 80s, the losses in some estimates reach half. Half of your muscle. Gone. Melted off the frame like snow off a warm roof, one quiet day at a time. Now here is the question that should be forming in your mind. And it is the right question. If I am walking every day, am I not fighting that? Am I not building the muscle back with all those steps? And the answer, and I am sorry to be the one to tell you, is no. Barely. And to understand why not, you have to understand what muscle actually responds to, because it does not respond to being used gently for a long time. It responds to being challenged hard. That is a different thing entirely. And the difference between those 2 ideas is the difference between staying on your feet at 85 and spending an afternoon on an emergency room table wondering how you got there. So let us look at that. Let us stop naming things and actually look at what the muscle is doing and what the bone underneath it is doing. Because when you look closely, the whole comfortable picture of the daily walk being enough does not just wobble. It comes apart in your hands. And the thing that pulls it apart is a single idea. An idea about force, about load, about how much you actually have to demand of a piece of living tissue before it agrees to get stronger instead of quietly getting weaker. Walking, for all its glory, for all that heart and lung magic I praised a minute ago, asks your muscles for almost nothing they have not already got. And a muscle that has never asked for more than it already has is a muscle with no reason on earth to stop shrinking. So picture what your legs actually do on a walk. You lift one foot, you swing it forward, you catch your weight, you do it again. Thousands of times. It is smooth. It is rhythmic. And that smoothness is exactly the problem. Your body is a marvelous cheapskate. It will not spend 1 ounce of protein-building muscle it does not need, and a muscle that can already handle a gentle stroll has told your body, loud and clear, that the stroll is no trouble at all. Nothing changes because nothing has to. The signal that says grow, the signal that says lay down more fiber, more bone, more of the good stuff, that signal only fires when you push a tissue close to what it can barely do. Engineers call it load. I will call it a demand. And a walk, bless it, makes almost no demand at all. Now let me be precise about what is slipping away while you take that comfortable stroll. Somewhere after 50, a person starts shedding muscle at a rate of 5 to 10% every decade. Say that slowly. Every 10 years, 1/10 of your engine can simply vanish, and after 60 the process does not politely slow down, it speeds up. There is a name for this quiet subtraction, sarcopenia. But I do not want you to fall in love with the name. The name does nothing. What matters is the picture. Imagine a man who over the whole span of his life loses something like 30% of the muscle he once had. By his 80s, some estimates put the loss at half. Half of the machinery gone. And here is the cruelty of it. You do not feel it going. There is no alarm. You just find one ordinary Tuesday that the chair is harder to get out of than it used to be, and you tell yourself you are tired, and you go for a walk, and the walk does not put 1 gram of it back. Why not? Because building muscle and building bone both run on that same law of demand, and walking simply does not deliver enough of it. The reviews on this are not shy. Aerobic exercise, the walking, the strolling, the pleasant morning loop around the block, does not load your skeleton or your muscles hard enough to make either one grow stronger. The lever that moves muscle and bone is resistance. Progressive overload, they call it, which is just a fancy way of saying you make the tissue lift a little more than it is comfortable with, and then, when that gets easy, you make it lift a little more again. That is the whole secret. That is the thing walking cannot fake. And the bone part of this ought to frighten you a little in a useful way. People think of bone as a dead scaffold, like the timber frame inside a wall. It is nothing of the kind. Bone is alive, it is busy, it is constantly being torn down and rebuilt by little crews of cells, and those crews take their orders from force. Push hard on a bone and the rebuilders show up. Leave a bone unchallenged and the demolition crew works unopposed. Now watch what resistance training does when you actually measure it. Load an older person's skeleton properly, and the bone mineral density at the hip climbs by a bit more than 0.5%, at the spine by about the same, roughly 0.6% in each place. That sounds tiny. It is not tiny. This is a tissue that was supposed to be quietly losing ground, and instead it is gaining, and the protective effect against a frail, snappable skeleton starts showing up after only about 12 weeks, 3 months. And walking, for all its heart magic, moves that number essentially not at all, because a stroll never asks the bone the hard question. Here is where the comfortable picture really begins to buckle in your hands. Because we have been talking about strength, about how much force a muscle can produce, and that is only half of the story. There is a second thing, and it is sneakier and almost nobody mentions it. It is called power. Now, strength and power sound like the same word dressed in different clothes, but to a physicist they are utterly different creatures. Strength is how much force you can make. Power is how fast you can make it. Force multiplied by speed. And it turns out that when you get old, you do not lose those two things at the same rate. The speed goes first, and it goes faster. After 65, muscle power drains away at something like 4% every single year. Not every decade, every year. Compare that to the slower bleed of raw muscle mass, and you see the trap. You can still be reasonably strong, you can still carry the groceries, and yet the quickness, the snap, the ability to produce force right now in 1/100th of a second is quietly evaporating underneath you. And why should you care about 1/100th of a second? Let me tell you exactly why. And this is the moment the whole thing turns. Deep in your muscles you have two broad kinds of fiber. There are the slow ones, the patient endurance fibers, the ones that carry you around the block all day long without complaint. Walking loves those, uses those, keeps those reasonably happy. And then there are the fast ones, the fast twitch fibers, the type 2 fibers, the explosive ones. Those are the fibers that do nothing, 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 all day, and then fire all at once in a single violent instant. And aging is savage to them specifically. An older person can lose up to 75% of those fast fibers. 3/4 of your explosive machinery gone, and it is precisely the machinery a gentle walk never once calls upon. So now I want you to picture a very ordinary moment. You are crossing your own kitchen. Your toe catches the edge of a rug. In that instant your body is falling, it has already begun to fall, and you have perhaps 1/4 of a second less to do something about it. What has to happen? Your leg must shoot out. Your hip must fire. A huge burst of force has to be produced immediately, right now, faster than thought, to jam a foot down in front of your falling weight and catch you. That is not strength. That is power. That is the fast twitch fibers doing the one job they exist to do, the job they have been silently practicing for your whole life and never once been asked to keep in shape. If those fibers are there, you stumble, you swear, you feel foolish, and you keep walking. If 3/4 of them have withered because the only exercise you ever did was stroll, then you do not catch yourself. You go down. And going down for an older body is not the small thing it was when you were 7. Let me hand you the numbers, because the numbers are the collapse of the whole comfortable story. Among Americans over 65, about 1 in 4 falls every single year. 1 in 4. That is roughly 14 million people every year hitting the floor. And it is not harmless. In one recent year, falls killed about 38,000 people over 65 and sent about 3 million of them to emergency rooms. Falls are the leading cause of injury death in that whole age group. Not car crashes, not anything exotic. Falling down. There is even a price tag on it, if a price tag helps you feel the weight of the thing. The non-fatal fall injuries alone, the broken hips and cracked wrists and shattered afternoons, cost something on the order of $80 billion a year. And that figure is climbing toward $101 billion by the end of the decade. But forget the dollars for a second, because the dollars are cold. Think instead of a single human being, someone's grandmother, who did everything she was told. She took her walk. Every morning, faithfully doctor's orders, around the block and back, and one afternoon her toe catches a rug, and the fibers that were supposed to save her are not there anymore, and she wakes up on an emergency room table wondering how in the world she got there when she did everything right. That is the terrible irony sitting at the center of this. She did not do everything right. She did one right thing, beautifully, faithfully, for years. She trained her heart and her lungs and left 3/4 of her rescue system to rot, because nobody told her the walk was only one leg of the stool. And the risk here is not vague, it is measurable. When that muscle loss sets in, when the sarcopenia takes hold, the odds of breaking a bone in a low-energy fall, the kind of gentle tip-over that a younger body would shrug off, go up by a factor of about 2.3. More than double. The weakness and the falling and the breaking are not 3 separate misfortunes. They are one chain, and every link in it is the same missing thing. Load. Demand. The hard question that walking never asks. So we have taken the comfortable picture and we have watched it come apart, thread by thread. The muscle that walking cannot rebuild. The bone that walking cannot load. The power that walking never touches. The fall that walking cannot prevent and may quietly leave you helpless to stop. And I do not tell you this to frighten you off your morning walk. Keep the walk. The walk is glorious. But the walk was never the whole prescription, and now that we have seen the wreckage of pretending it was, we have to do the interesting part. We have to build the real thing back up from the ground, piece by piece, and figure out exactly what you have to demand of that living tissue to make it stop shrinking and start, against every expectation, to grow again. So let us build it honestly from the bottom. And the first thing I want you to understand is that the recipe is not a mystery. It is written down plainly by people who count these things for a living. Keep your walking. The hard people were right about that. Somewhere around 150 minutes a week of moving briskly enough that your breath deepens. Call it a little over 20 minutes a day, or a good half hour 5 days out of 7. That is the endurance leg of the stool, and it is a strong leg. Leave it alone. But now you add the thing the walk was never doing. At least 2 days every week, you have to make your muscles work against something that fights back. Not a stroll, a demand. And on top of that, you practice balance on purpose, deliberately as its own separate skill, the way you would practice scales on a piano. Now people hear the word strength training, and they picture some enormous young man grunting under a bar loaded with iron, veins standing out on his neck, and they think, well, that is certainly not me. I am 73 years old and I have a bad shoulder. Throw that picture away. That is not what we are talking about at all. What the tissue needs is not violence. It needs to be asked a question it cannot easily answer. Stand up out of a chair without using your hands and sit back down. Slow, controlled. Do that until it gets hard. That is a squat. That is strength training. Your own body is the weight. Push against the wall. Carry a bag of groceries and notice you are carrying it. Rise up onto your toes by the kitchen counter and lower down slow. The whole business is embarrassingly ordinary. And the shape of the recipe when the researchers write it out comes down to something you could keep in your head. Pick 8 or 10 movements that between them use all the big muscles. The legs, the hips, the back, the chest, the arms. For each one you work until somewhere around the 12th to the 15th repetition it genuinely feels like effort. Not agony, effort. Call it a 5 or a 6 or a 7 on a scale where 10 is everything you have. And you do that 2 or 3 times a week, with a day of rest in between. Because, and this is the part that delights me, the growing does not happen while you are working. The working is only the question. The growing is the answer, and the answer gets written overnight, while you sleep, while you eat, when you have entirely forgotten about the whole thing. Here is why the rest matters, and it is the loveliest piece of the machine. When you make a muscle strain against a real load, you are not building it in that moment. You are doing a small, controlled amount of damage. You are sending a message. You are telling that living tissue in the only language it understands that the demands of your life have gone up, that the world is asking more of you than it did last week. And the body, which is frugal and does not build 1 ounce more than it thinks you need, finally has a reason to spend. It lays down new protein. It thickens the fiber. It calls back some of those fast, explosive fibers you had been quietly losing. It does this because you gave it a reason, and walking, for all its virtues, never gave it a reason, because walking never asked for more than you could already do. And the bone, that patient scaffolding underneath all of it, is listening to exactly the same signal. Bone is not a dead mineral shelf. It is alive, it is being torn down and rebuilt every day of your life, and it rebuilds according to the forces it feels. Pull on it hard through a working muscle, load it, and the bone-building crews get the message and lay down fresh mineral right where the stress was greatest. And the studies bear this out in numbers you can hold. After roughly 12 weeks, a matter of 3 months, resistance training begins to push bone mineral density measurably upward. At the hip, at the spine, the 2 places of fall is most likely to break you. The gains look modest written down, a fraction of a percent at the hip, a fraction at the spine. But you have to understand which way the river was flowing before you jumped in. That bone was supposed to be thinning. You did not merely slow the loss, you reversed the sign. You turned a subtraction into an addition, and you did it with a signal walking could not send. Now let me give you the numbers that ought to make you want to start this afternoon, because they are frankly a little outrageous for how ordinary the work is. Take a group of older people, people in their 60s and 70s and 80s, people everyone had quietly written off as being on the downward slope, and put them on a real structured strength program for a few months. And you measure their lower body strength at the end. It comes up by something like 29 to 33%. Their legs, the part of them that failing had threatened to take away their independence, get roughly a third stronger. The upper body climbs by around 24-25% in a matter of months, in tissue that the calendar had supposedly condemned. You are not clawing back inches. You are winning back years of function that everyone, including you, had assumed were gone for good. Sit with how strange that is. We started this whole talk with a story of steady, quiet decline, muscle draining away by the decade, power falling by roughly 4% every single year after 65, bone thinning, balance fading, a body running downhill, and a morning walk that could not put on the brakes. And the answer to all of it, the single lever that touches the muscle and the bone and the power and the balance and the falling all at once, turns out to be the one demand we had left out: load. You do not have to accept the slope. The slope was never a law of nature. It was a description of what happens to a body that is never asked to do anything hard, and the moment you ask, the body answers. And I want to be careful and fair here, because I have been rough on walking and it does not deserve to be thrown out. Walking is still doing real and precious work. It is still filling your lungs and driving your heart and lifting the number that predicts, better than almost anything we can measure, how long and how well you will live. Keep walking. But now you know what walking cannot say, and you know who has to say the rest. You do, with a chair, with a wall, with your own weight, with 2 or 3 quiet sessions a week that nobody has to see. There is a thing my old habit of mind keeps coming back to, and I will leave you with it. You can learn the name of a bird in every language on earth, and when you are done, you will know precisely nothing about the bird. To know the bird, you have to watch the bird. You have to see what it does, and it is exactly the same with this. Everybody knows the name of the thing. Walking is exercise. Exercise is good for you. They can say it in a dozen languages, and it is true, and it is also completely empty. Because the name is not the knowledge. The knowledge is in the tissue. It is in what the muscle actually needs, and what the bone actually feels, and what the fast fiber is actually for, and none of that lives inside the word exercise. It lives in the mechanism. It lives in the demand. So do not walk because a poster told you to. Do not lift because I told you to. Get curious about the machine you are living inside. Ask it a hard question and watch, with real attention, what it does in answer. Because you are not investigating this to confirm what you already believe. You are investigating because there is something here you did not know. Something the calendar had convinced you was hopeless and settled, and it is neither. The body you were told to simply accept has been waiting, this whole time, to be asked for more. And the remarkable, stubborn, hopeful truth of the matter is that it is still listening, and it will still answer, right up until the day you stop asking.